In the winter of 1883, the author was appointed by President Arthur to the legation in Persia, just created by Act of Congress. In 1885, with the accession of the Democratic Party to power, he returned to private life, in accordance with the practice of the diplomatic service of the United States. The experiences connected with the establishment and conduct of the legation at Tehran suggested the present volume. Notwithstanding that the preface is usually the portion of a book that is least read, the writer ventures to call attention here to 2 or 3 points in connection with this volume. Certain portions of it have already appeared in Harper's Monthly, the Century Magazine, and the Manhattan Magazine, and are republished now by the courtesy of the publishers of those periodicals. But these parts have not only been greatly modified, they also represent not only a small portion of the entire work, of which fully 5/6 now appear in print for the first time. A feature to which the author has given special attention has been the pronunciation of Oriental words. The question of accent in Asiatic languages has never been sufficiently understood and appreciated, even by scholars and experts in comparative linguistics. Our pronouncing gazetteers, prepared expressly to teach the pronunciation of foreign words, are found to be ludicrously defective and misleading when they undertake to instruct in the pronunciation and accentuation of Oriental names. Continental Europeans generally seize the distinctive features of Oriental pronunciation, but the author remembers scarce any Englishmen or Americans, however thoroughly versed in the construction of Turkish or Persian, whose pronunciation could be accepted as either natural or correct, excepting such as were born abroad. In those languages, the tendency is to throw the accent forward towards or on the final syllable with strong emphasis, while in the English language the accent is thrown back as far as possible. That principle being also followed with all foreign words when incorporated into English usage, as for example, Paris for pare, Socrates for Socrates, Margaret for Marguerite, Paris for Paris, Socrates for Socrate, Margaret for Marguerite. How different the Persian tongue would sound if accented in the English way is shown if we alter the accent in certain English words. Notice the difference between cathedral and catedral, or architecture and architecture, Washington and Washington. An American pronounces the Persian words imam and sadeh, imam, sadeh, Ali, Ali, Dule, Dula, Iran, Iran. In the present work, Persian names and words have been printed with an accent, usually a circumflex. Over the syllable, which is actually accented by the Persians themselves, who, of course, are the ones who know best how their language should be pronounced. The letter I, when found in Turkish and Persian words, should invariably be pronounced like E. The long I sound does not exist in those languages except approximately as in the diphthong I. Ali should be pronounced Ali. In several instances, the author has substituted E for I in well-known words, while in others he has preferred to leave the I rather than appear singular or cause misunderstanding, as in the case of the geographical word Enseli, properly pronounced Enseli, or the name of the famous poet Saadi, pronounced Saadi. The use of I in the spelling of Oriental words where E, for those employing the English language, would more correctly represent the actual pronunciation is an anomaly that can be accounted for only on the ground that the Latins preceded the Anglo-Saxons in the East, and with them I is always E. But in retaining the Latin orthography, we forget that I in the continental languages never has the long I sound peculiar to the English tongue. The letter A, when found in Oriental words, has the sound of A in father, but never the broad A sound in English. Very rarely it has the sound of A in nascent, as for example, Nazarumuk, pronounced like A in father. And Nazarumuk with the AS in nascent. In Persian, the difference is represented by a difference in the spelling, but in English it would be difficult to represent it. The author was led to observe these discrepancies when living in the Levant in early life, and subsequent observation and reflection have confirmed him in his conclusions regarding Oriental orthography, pronunciation, and accentuation. In closing his remarks on this subject, it may be well to add that the letter H, when found in Oriental words in this volume, is not a silent letter, but should be pronounced as a soft guttural, strongly in the middle of a word and suggestively when it is a terminal. The H in Mahdi is strong and soft in the terminal H of Shah. A curious fact connected with the Persian language is also found in the frequent interchangeableness of A and U. Mazandaran is likewise pronounced Mazandarun. Ispahan, Ispahun. Namad, Namud, Naserdin, Nuserdin. For merely the use of the latter sound seems Formerly, the use of the latter sound seems to have been more common, but at present the sound A is the A sound is considered more elegant and is gradually superseding the other, although the use of the latter cannot be considered incorrect. The ear should be practiced before the eye in learning a foreign tongue, exactly as a child acquires his native language. In 2 or 3 instances, certain facts mentioned in these pages, which had a double application, have been repeated twice in successive chapters when such repetition tended to emphasize the subject in question or was essential to a clear statement. A few words may be added in explanation of the freedom of opinion in which the author has occasionally indulged. During the period of his official service, he had no opinions on public questions which he felt at liberty to formulate in either words or acts. 3 departments of government should be entirely independent of party: the military, the judiciary, and the diplomatic. The position of a diplomatic should be that of absolute impartiality towards all foreign nations and governments in time of outward peace, and strictly colorless with respect to politics at home. He represents and protects the interests of his entire country abroad, and to do so properly must deport himself towards all foreigners in such a way as not to prejudice the interests under his charge. His motto should be patriotism, firmness, tempered by tact and watchfulness, and zeal guided by reticence, secrecy, and reserve. The last 3 terms may seem tautological, yet each represents a different shade of meaning, and all are of the first importance in successful diplomacy. While near the court of Persia, it was the earnest endeavor of the author to follow these precepts, but now that he is no longer in official service, he is free to give some expression to opinions based on practical experience. He has therefore exercised that liberty at times when to do so would not be inexpedient for the public interest, nor conflict with the secrecy of official transactions, nor the honor which imposes reticence regarding confidential conversations. SGWB. It was a fair morning in May when our steamer glided towards the haven of Trebizond. On the right were the high, thinly settled hills of Asia Minor, deeply cloven by purple gorges draped with perennial verdure. Up the steep slopes rolling clouds arose, sun-smitten, revealing the venerable Byzantine church of Santa Sofia, standing alone on a cliff, and the red roofs and grey walls of an ancient town peeping through dense masses of foliage. Xenophon and the 10,000 finished their retreat at Trebizond. It was the capital of a division of the Lower Empire. For ages it was the port for the caravans moving to Persia and the vast, mysterious regions of Central Asia. But what traveler now thinks of visiting Trebizond or the southeastern shores of the Black Sea? The Euxine has labored under the misfortune of having few good harbors on the southern side. This has resulted to the advantage of Russia, which owns the whole of the northern and eastern shore, as also the best ports. It is not so long ago since Trebizond was an emporium for the Circassian slave trade. An old-time reminiscence may be observed in the curious lighters which sweep up over the rollers towards the steamer. They are identical in form with the Greek galleys of ancient times, and are undoubtedly a direct perpetuation of ancient naval architecture, of which only one other instance probably exists at the present day. I refer to the finishing galleys of Lisbon. Over the stern of these boats of Trebizond swings the long oar-like rudder, moved by a standing helmsman. The city itself is composed of winding lanes, which are excessively narrow but not uncleanly, for the steep slope and the frequent rains are favorable to a result uncommon in eastern cities. The houses are not visible until one passes the gate of the high wall surrounding the grounds. Each dwelling stands in a garden of mulberry, pomegranate, and linden trees, interwoven with luxuriant vines. The gates are so low that one must stoop to enter, a precaution adopted in stormier times when a man's house was often also his fortress. The commander of the garrison, a Turk of the old regime, touched by a love of nature, more innate in the Oriental than in his more civilized brother of the West, had planted a small flower garden on the brow of the cliff, where a battery frowned grimly over the sea. He was about to start for a ride into the country when we were announced. With characteristic courtesy, the old gentleman dismounted and invited us to partake of the customary refreshments in his garden. The morning was serene, and a more delightful spot could hardly be imagined on which to take a thimbleful of Turkish coffee and a pipe of stambouleh. Below, a group of idol coasters, curiously carved and painted, floated languidly on the glassy swell of the port, each repeated in the crystal mirror on which it was poised. Beyond, the broad expanse of the placid Euxine spread towards the north, and behind us beetled the bold precipices of Maltepe. With the approach of evening, a new revelation of splendor was granted. Bursting suddenly forth from the clouds, when dipping below the verge of the sea, the red sun bathed the city with indescribable glory that seemed to penetrate into the most hidden recesses of the town, while from the vapory region of the northeast the evening splendor brought forth the vast pinnacled ranges of the Caucasus, whose eternal snows, hued with rose, were ineffably sublime, extending around half the area of the horizon. When the sun disappeared, When the sun disappeared, the mountains of Circassia also retired and were seen no more. There Prometheus was chained. And there during all succeeding ages the human soul has struggled and suffered. But the radiance of another life is needed to reveal the tragic grandeur of this ever repeated and relentless torment on the crags of destiny, and give a solution and an end to the pangs of existence. The following day at dawn, cleaving the foam across the quivering gleam of the morning star, our steamer glided into the port of Batum, 80 miles east of Trebizond. This was the best harbor the Osmanli held on the southern coast. Therefore the Russian coveted and took it. The wheel of fortune turns for all. But the misery is that many linger after the wheel has turned the last time in their favor. 7 years ago, the Turks held the place. Now the Turks are seen no more at Batum. Its Muslim inhabitants have emigrated to Nicomedia, where their government has given them lands, but many died on the hard journey. In the sweeping execration awarded to the Turk by Christendom, it seems to have been forgotten that Turks have rights and feelings. Turks have feelings. No less than other races. Also, that in the exercise of sway, it is an incontrovertible fact that they have been no more cruel. No more cruel than were the races they subjugated in their turn. The Turkish side of the story has never been told. It is willfully ignored that if the right of the Turk to the territory he holds is no better, it is also no worse than the right of any other power in Europe. The territorial right of the sword, the right of the mightier, which has always ruled. Always. Is there any appreciable amount of territory in Europe held by any other tenure? Only some nations have held theirs longer than Turkey and have been nominal Christians. Nominal Christians! Exclamation mark. I am not an unreasoning Philo-Turk, but I earnestly believe in justice to all. It is well also to remember that every question has two sides. There is a grand pathos in the bearing of the Saracen and the Turk when retiring from territory which they have held for ages. Ages. This lofty face of Oriental character has been well suggested by our historians when describing the conquest of Spain from the Moors. The same tragedy is being enacted in Turkey today. Unlike other people, when conquered, the Turks scorn to remain under the rule of the victor. They retire like refluent waves lives. Thus it was after the liberation of Greece, thus after the capture of Romania by the Russians, and thus it has been at Batum. The Turks who were there for 400 years are gone, 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 gone. So it was when, after an age of terrible warfare and cruelty, Russia subdued the Caucasus, the Circassians disdained to remain. A whole nation emigrated in the face of obstacles which cost them nearly 500,000 lives. Were it not for the malaria, were it not for the malaria that lurks by its lovely river, Batum, 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 tum, 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 would be a spot greatly to be sought for its extraordinary beauty. The Russians are rapidly erecting modern buildings near the quays, but the old town is a mere huddle of dilapidated one-story houses and shops, whose aspect is relieved by here and there a crumbling minaret, a crumbling minaret, crumbling minaret. Or the two-story mansion of a Turkish magnet of yore, lifting its mossy roof of red tiles and its painted upper story above a wild wood of greenery. The chattering stork has usurped the place of the muezzin, the sound of whose musical summons no more floats over the bay, no more. But what language can portray the beauty and grandeur of the mountains which enclose the ancient town? Clad with primeval verdure, they spring abruptly from the sea and through tremendous canyons show you the higher ranges inland, terminating in spear-like peaks crowned with eternal snow. Two rivers descend from these snows, well stored with fish. The angler who seeks the mountain depths can easily find capital sport with the rod. And return with a fine mess of brook trout. But with all their seeming tranquility, there is a spiteful spirit lurking in the gorges of Batum, Batum, tum, tum, Batum, 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 tum, 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 tum. For be the day ever so calm, it is liable to be darkened in a few moments by a violent gust from the mountain.